I'll say hi and welcome everyone here right now and in the recording maybe afterwards. Today is the first webinar of the topic 2 in ONL261 Open Education. Open learning, sharing and openness is what we're calling it. And today it's my pleasure to welcome Teresa. And Teresa is an open educator and an award-winning language teacher, and has a wealth of experience in online teaching and learning, and is also not new to open network learning because you have been already doing a similar webinar in ONL 171 or 172
That's it,
something.
171, yes,
Maybe
yes.
like it was 171. So nine, is my math correct? 9 years ago.
Yes, I'm afraid time flies, but yes, that's so true.
Amazing. So thank you so much and for joining us and contributing to this iteration. And I'll hand over the floor to you.
Thank you so much, and thank you everybody for just letting me know in the chat where you're joining from. It's great to see that we're pulling together different continents. I retired from educating. I was a language educator for 30 plus years, and I retired in 2021. Um, and since then, my life is a bit smaller than it used to be. I used to travel all over the world, and now my traveling is virtual more than physical. So it's lovely to put a virtual foot back into places I've been before, like Finland and Poland. Haven't been to Kenya yet. Put it on the list. Maybe virtually is the only way, the only way I'm going to do that in the short term. So, just to find out a little bit more about who we are and to get to know each other, I'm going to share my slides first of all. Right, and Turkey, wonderful. I have lots of open friends in Turkey who've done some wonderful work. So it's great to see you. Thank you. So let me just share my screen. And you will see lots of things that you don't need to see, but I'm going to just slide that out of the way a little bit. There we go. And move to the slideshow. And let's reload this. There we go. Right. So do feel free whilst I'm talking to pop any queries or questions into the chat, and periodically I will revisit them. But first, a big thank you to Jörg for sharing my post and the resources that I put in place for today. Hopefully you've had a chance to look at them, but if you haven't, don't worry, because we'll have some time to consider them and to chat about them a little bit anyway. So I deliberately called my slide Metamorphosis because I got involved in open education back in the early 2000s. I'd never heard of open education at the point before. I had come into uh, higher education via the start of my teaching in secondary school. And in those days, we didn't do digital. We barely had the internet. We had a few CD-ROMs towards the end of my career, but that was about it. And teachers of French didn't use computers, of course. We were supposed to be analog. So my experience of sharing, however, came from that analog background. Because in those days when I was teaching French, and those of you who've ever taught languages or have learned a language in a formal setting will know that language learning is quite resource intensive. You have to have lots of different materials, lots of different ways of inspiring people and helping them understand and pick up new language without mediating everything through their first language. And because it's resource intensive, and certainly secondary teaching is also very time intensive, we used to share our, in those days, worksheets that we created physically between ourselves within the department. So sharing was very much a part of my teaching culture. That's where I came from initially, really, as a language teacher, creating things that were just tuned in for my teaching audience, for my students at the time, and that would also evolve over time according to what we needed. So when I talk about metamorphosis, I'm thinking back over my entire career from those analog days of running off and creating Banda worksheets. For those of you who've been in teaching, you will understand that there was quite a bit of physical printing went on, or collecting realia every time you visited the country whose language you were teaching and bringing that home. But when we moved online, when the digital world and the internet started, and it's kind of was many years ago now, it seems like another world. It was a wonderful opportunity to think, well, we could connect directly with students in France. We could share, or my students could actually talk to them physically in front of a screen and get to know each other, and we could exchange information. So I was very keen to get involved in the digital and to actually look at how I could share and connect with other educators. And fortunately, not unfortunately, and fortunately, I have been lucky enough to be able to do that over the past 20 odd years of my career since the internet appeared. However, things change, life changes. Everything changes, doesn't it? Technology changes. So in the early days of the internet, I was most interested about how we could speak, how we could use our voices across the internet. And that was, in those days, very, very difficult. So a lot of the work that I did on voice over the internet in the early 2000s was about the problems that we would run into, the buffering, the slow technology, the bandwidth demands. And many of you will be aware of that because in many countries, those sort of problems continue to exist, although mobile technology has helped a lot. And of course, with the pandemic, nowadays, using Zoom has become much more normalized. So you will probably be very familiar with Zoom. Do feel free to pop into the chat any of your thoughts as well about your personal journeys, because this is not really, as nice as it is to have an opportunity to talk about my life, I'd like to hear about yours too. So let's move on to the next slide. Here we are. So into the wilds. The wilds was what we used to call, and it's still the term is still out there, what we used to call connecting in the internet, if you like, or through the internet, something that in my discipline was referred to as computer mediated communication, or CMC. Nowadays, most students wouldn't even think of, how else do you mediate communication? These days, computers are pretty central to our existence, are they not? But in those days, it was kind of scary, and there were all sorts of things that we had to sort out and used to worry about as well, particularly to do with the netiquette and the things you needed to understand in order to connect without having lots of negative experiences online. And obviously, as a teacher of young people and young adults, it was really important that we protected them and that we made sure that their experience of the internet was safe. So as I started my open practice journey, what I was particularly concerned about was connecting with other people. As a total novice online, I wanted to find connections and people who could help me, people who were used to using digital technologies. So that led me down a route of sort of connecting through setting up my own identity online. So a professional identity online that people could come across so that we could meet up. So I made myself a profile digitally available profile. And actually, I was pretty broad-minded about the technologies and the spaces I would be present in. You've got a little screenshot at the top right there of some of the technologies I am still present in. So at the time, there was something called Google Circles and Google Wave, which was going around. It's all long since gone. LinkedIn, Net Vibes, which is still around. That's that little green square there. YouTube, I wanted to make sure that I had a channel there. Blogger for free blogging, and blogging was very important to me at the time. Instagram, WordPress, which I used for a longer, more in-depth reflective space really for myself over the years. And Haiku Deck was just one of the technologies I used for making presentations. So I also wanted to find expert networks, and that was my journey really into joining things like ONL, but also the Association for Learning Technology, ALT, which I know some of you are aware of already. And what I wanted to do was to sort of reflect the things I was dealing with, getting to know how to find my way to navigate this huge internet, which was quite scary, and finding others who would be able to help and support me. So, and I obviously joined the usual sort of academic route there with publishing and joining conferences. But also I was keen to find out who was doing what online to see whether there were things I could learn and things that I could apply to my experience. And I was very fortunate to be able to find that largely actually through ALT as my first connection. But then gradually, you know, the computer assisted learning, language learning community were very open and keen to get involved. So Eurocall was one of the networks as well that I joined, and that's internationally open. And what I wanted to do was show what I was doing and the experiences, reflect on the experiences I was having, not as a leader, but as somebody fumbling to understand and looking for support and help in that. So I've kind of summarized a little bit of my experience on the blog post. So I want to just give everybody a couple of minutes, if they haven't had a chance yet, to open that and to have a little look. Let me just stop my share for a moment. And
The link is in the chat.
the link, oh, thank you very much. That's really helpful. Thank you if you've added
Sure.
the link in. That's really handy. Yes, and netiquette. Yes. Isn't it funny how times change and we lose the language that we used to have? So this blog spot, I'm just going to take a quick slip down through the chat to see if I haven't missed anything. So please let me know, and feel free if you wish to open your mic or to pop in the chat. Please let me know where your open journey is now. Is this all brand new, or is this something that you've come across before? Open education as a term, is it new, or are you already experienced open educationers? Because I don't want to swamp you with lots of links to things that you already know about. And thank you, Jörg, for sharing the Blogspot link in the chat.
Sure.
That's great. Lovely. So would anybody like to either pop something in the chat or open their mic and tell me a little bit about your open journey or what open means to you? And while I'm giving you time to think about that, I'm just going to share another link for those for whom open is a new idea and something that isn't necessarily something you've come across. And that is a little Blogspot presentation. I've actually put it on our Padlet, which we'll share and we'll look at together, but which is just a short demystifying open. because let's just put this in the chat. I spent about 10 years as the lead for ALT's Open Education Special Interest Group. And lots of the webinars that we used to organise are still available on YouTube. So, but if you're new to Open and you haven't come across it before, that very short blog post that I've just added as well may help to just demystify some of the terminology that you come across when you start to navigate Open and open practice. Let me just give everybody a moment. So do feel free if there's anything you want to add to the chat, or feel free to open your mic. Are we all shy? Or are you in offices and rooms where there are other people around? Isabel, thank you. Wow, a computational biologist. Wow, I didn't even know that existed, but of course it exists. Wonderful. That's marvelous. Wonderful, Isabel. Thank you for doing that on behalf of biologists everywhere. And do make sure that it's easily findable online, or feel free to, add a link into our Padlet, which we'll have a look at together in a few moments.
Yeah, I think that this is I'm sorry. So I'm Isabel Duarte. I'm a computational biologist or bioinformatician in Portugal. But I think that this is a community that is very connected to open everything. So open source and open materials. So because everything is so expensive, so I think that this is a community that moved towards everything open, like Linux open systems, the tools that we use, the programming tools that we use, everything is open. And because of living, like growing up in this community, we are used to being open, to sharing things openly, to create open communities, to create training materials that then go online for others, to democratize access to everything. So I think it is because I'm from this area. It's not that I'm specially like this. I grew up like this. So it's kind of, I don't think that you will meet a computational biologist that it's going to tell you, no, everything I do is closed source. No, everything we do is open, and yeah.
That's wonderful. That's so lovely. Thank you for sharing that. And very much at the heart of the Open Ed special interest group as it existed was this methodology, really, of making sure that things were accessible and democratized, and education was for everybody. And absolutely, yes, I wish all academic communities were like that. It's yeah, it's very important. Wonderful, thank you. I'm just going to check the chat again, see if there's anything I've missed before I move on. Right, okay. So if open or is still new to you, then I hope that that little blog post will help you explore the various parts of it. As Isabel said, open source, as well as open educational practice, OER, open educational resources. And OER seemed to be very central when I started off. Everything, the conversations around open were all around OER. And that's great, but actually there are lots of things that need to be open in order to be a real ecosystem of open, including ourselves being open to each other and sharing. So marvelous, that's great. Let's share my screen again and just pick up on these slides. So I was mentioning that Padlet board, and I will come back to that in just a moment. So what did being open mean to me? Well, it really meant, as I carried on along the open community and extended my open community, it meant being intentional about sharing. And as you were saying, Isabel, it's wonderful to see that, because you know, it's like those water cooler moments you have as a teacher when you sort of meet up or over coffee and you chat to other teachers. We learn so much from each other. So it really doesn't make sense to be in silos. So one of the networks I set up was my Warwick language identity, if you like, and sharing intentionally. Now, at that time, social media was just getting off the blocks as well. So I was at Warwick Language on Twitter for many years, sort of starting off in 2009. And starting a blog and starting sharing and just making little short video captures of what I was doing, and really was useful for me. And I also set up a Google site you can see linked on that screenshot there. And oh, that's interesting. Just ignore that. That's my Google. I don't know whether you actually heard that, but my Google smart speaker decided it was going to talk to us. Also wants to get involved. Anyway, we'll ignore it. One of the very first things I did, because obviously as a digital educator, you're making a lot of digital artifacts, a lot of presentations. And I'd got loads on loads of slides, loads of PowerPoints at the time. And I thought, okay, well, there was a little tool called SlideShare I'd seen people use. I thought I'll take a look at that. At the time, SlideShare was linked to LinkedIn. So I had a profile on LinkedIn and a free account on SlideShare. And what amazed me was, you know, these little presentations that I'd made for teaching French, little PowerPoints, got 20,000 views and 27,000 views. Well, obviously that was taking it a little bit further than the 45 that I'd used it for that year and would sort of revisit the following year. So seeing that, I could start to realize that actually there was great sustainability and also help for some people to share these things and put them out there. My PowerPoints are not perfect. And I was very clear about that on my blog posts. I share them on the basis of, you know, this is the best I've done in order to do this, in order to teach this particular aspect of language or whatever. You know, make of it what you will. And then I had to start to think a little bit about sharing and what sharing meant. I was very much sharing the ordinary, but it was actually very important to think about what that meant to the people who were reading those PowerPoints and using them, and start to find that conversation. So what I'm going to do now is to open up this, and I'll do this on my screen, I think, to talk you through it for those of you not as familiar with Padlet. So let's just do this through my screen. So a Padlet board, you know, how many of us as students had a pin board in our room? Yeah, you know, just a notice board where you pin up things that, you know, the posters that you'd found or pictures that you liked. So to have a digital version of that was really, really helpful. I thought, yeah, I'm going to enjoy using a digital version of Padlet, a digital version of a notice board, and then sharing it. So I became a Padlet user very, very early on. Now these days, Padlet is a paid, I think you get 3 boards, and then beyond that you have to pay. But because I've been around for so many years using Padlet, I can reuse my Padlet boards, and I've got about 30 of them. So I've got plenty of space that I could come back to. So I've just put together some of the resources around the very short time that we've got together today, so that you can revisit them, and that those people who haven't been able synchronously to join us today can visit them and to find out and revisit the links. And also you'll see these 2 columns on the far side, you can add to here. So you're very welcome to post your thoughts, and if there's something you're particularly interested in or concerned about, add them to there, and I can come back and comment and add further links as and when they're useful for you, rather than throwing lots and lots of things at you. And if you've got questions, as obviously if you're here, you can put them in the chat, but those of you accessing this later, feel free to pop your questions on the chat on the Padlet board here, and I can revisit them later. So what I'd done so far was break out of the walled garden of teaching within and just for my small community within the University of Warwick, and started to think a little bit about my digital presence, and also started to think and worry a little bit about sharing online. And that took a little bit more thought. So I was thinking, obviously, we're familiar with academic publishing. Many of you will be familiar with academic publishing. But what does publishing online mean? And at the time I was starting sharing my slides on SlideShare, for example, the domain was very unclear. One of the connections I'd come across in, I think this is about 2012, was somebody called Alan Levine, Cogdog. And I was really interested in his thoughts on perhaps we should have some way of understanding how to use licenses for our own material when we share it online. And I'd come across this expression Creative Commons a few times, but didn't really know much about it. So I've shared with you, for those of you who have never heard of a Creative Commons license, some material here that will just take you through a sort of basic insight into what a Creative Commons license is. Based on copyright law, essentially it's a way of saying, well, when I post this to an online space, an open online space, whether it's a PowerPoint slide or perhaps your thoughts in a blog, or maybe examples of something that you're doing at a particular time, I want to use a Creative Commons license in order to express how I wish that to be used. My concern at the time was that those openly shared things might just be scooped up and then sold to students, because it's very easy to do that on the internet, to scrape things that are there and then to either pass them off as your own or to bundle them up and say, okay, well, I'll sell these back to students. And I didn't want that to happen because of this principle, really, of democratization. I wanted to express how I'd like them to be used. So I've shared there the link to Creative Commons that literally gives you everything you need to know about Creative Commons. We could take dozens of sessions like this in order to dig into those, but what Creative Commons as an organization did was to set up some accredited courses that you could do. So I invested a little of my money and time into finding out how to use Creative Commons licenses and what they could do for me. And from there, what I wanted to do was to find out a little bit more about how I could assert my ownership, if you like, over the content that I had, and how I could make sure that things wouldn't just be taken from me. Now, this may be something you're already familiar with. You may already know all about Creative Commons licenses. You may well be already using them. But what I thought I'd do was, just for a bit of fun, give us 5 minutes or so to embark on a little bit of a quiz. So again, I'll pop the quiz into the chat if it's not there already, which, knowing Jörg, who's very efficient, possibly already is.
I'm a little bit behind now.
Oh, no worries, no worries. So
Thanks.
there's the link to the quiz. And what I suggest we do is just spend a few minutes. So I will just stop sharing for a moment so you can have some time to engage in that quiz and see what you know already about Creative Commons. So it's one of those, it's totally anonymous to do the quiz. Only you can see the results, but you'll see the results, aggregated results of everybody, but they're all anonymous. Let's find out what you know already about ownership and Creative Commons and publishing online. And you can do the quiz as many times as you like. So if you get feedback and a wrong answer, it doesn't matter, do it again. So let's allow a few minutes for you to engage with that while I just scan back as well over the chat. Oh, wonderful. A GitHub user too. Thank you. Isabel, you're a wonderful example. We should do this as a tandem. Right.
And
I'm going to switch my audio and my camera off for a minute so you can concentrate. So I'm not interrupting. I hope you found that fun, Isabel. Yeah, it's meant to be fun, so you can do it many times and come back to it. But I would seriously recommend Creative Commons um, uh, materials, and everything that I learned from going through that training process again is shared openly. So if that's something you would be interested in, pop it on the Padlet, pop a note to remind me, and then I will add the links as a comment, because it's actually very useful to understand how Creative Commons licenses work. So let's just return to our slides. Then you can get certified. Yes, I'm certified. My husband would say it's just as well I'm certified.
Great online course.
Yes, it is. It is a great, really participative course. I really recommend it. I thoroughly enjoyed it. So I was going through the wilds, connecting, sharing intentionally also aggregating, drawing in, using hashtags, drawing in conversations, and using the expertise I was developing for my networks as well. So for Eurocall, as I mentioned before, and using different tools. At that point in the internet, we had things called tweet decks, and a lot of the education chat was taking place in Twitter in those days. And when one tool died, you moved to another one. This is a screenshot from a tool called Wakelet that I used to use to aggregate, to pull in together the conversations on a particular hashtag topic. And that was very easy to do in those days. And you can see here, I've got 97 collections within my Wakelet account. But the times were already starting to change, I'm afraid. So let me show you SlideShare, one of the first places that I was using to share my PowerPoints. Up on there, I had a PowerPoint for a Eurocall conference called Critically Open. It's still available, fortunately. So if you go to SlideShare or you have a SlideShare account, you can either put my name in or put in Critically Open, and you should be able to find it. When I wanted to find it to share with you today, surprise, surprise, I could download my own presentation for free, but I would have to be committing to a monthly payment of £11 in order to continue my account. So alarm bells started to ring for me as I could see that more and more of these what had been open platforms that had encouraged you to share your content were actually being monetized, and Scribed took over SlideShare, and like the books which I'd also published on there, I would have to pay in order to access them. So a sign of changing times. And more recently, especially as I've retired, I've been looking at what's going on with the internet I knew. So I'm just going to read you a quick excerpt here from a book called Enshittification by Cory Doctorow. Why everything suddenly got worse and what to do about it. And he talks about the old good internet. The old good internet was a place where enshittification, in other words, making things more difficult, had consequences. There was competition, lots and lots of platforms you could use. There was regulation. People wanted interoperability. So whether they were looking at things on a laptop, on a Mac, on a phone, however they were looking at things, they wanted to be able to see the same thing. And when I share something, I want it to be accessible to everybody, whatever device they're using. And the moral sensibilities of tech workers all combined to keep tech honest and to punish tech that wasn't. The good old internet, sorry, this is coming from Cory again, was a place where people with a large dollop of technical knowledge or a burning desire to acquire it could meet with one another, conduct dialogues with one another, inspire and frustrate one another, sell things and buy things from one another, and take action together without needing permission from a handful of tech giants. So that was the wonderful internet that I certainly was very excited about and enjoyed. So what is enshittification, this word that Cory puts forward that is very rapidly gaining traction? It's this process that platforms went on as soon as they became as popular as they are, the temptation to stop being quite so good to their users, to think about the monetization they could incur by being good to business customers, either through advertising or giving them information about who was using their platform so that they could target them, and then make the most profit that they could from their tools. So it was all about forgetting your users. Don't worry about that anymore. Now let's see how we can advertise, how we can monetize, how we can target these users. And as you can see here, what Corey did was to look at certain platforms, and I've just summarized here the first few chapters of his book. So Facebook was one of the first in there. Again, one of the reasons why I talked about metamorphosis, because Facebook is owned by Meta, Instagram is owned by Meta. The pyramids of ownership have got tighter and tighter. So rather than lots and lots of individual platforms out there all competing to encourage us to share and to use them, now the big ones, the big fish have eaten the little fish, and the pyramid has got tighter and tighter. So there are more people losing their small and often sort of freely developed platforms to larger owners who then call the tune, who then say, this is how it's going to work. So you've got Facebook, Amazon, iPhone, and Twitter there. Corey talks very, very I think, respectfully about Twitter and the journey of Twitter. And I think that's largely because he understood that the coders in Twitter really didn't like the way things moved once it was purchased by Musk, and how quickly things became more and more damaging. So it was back in, I think it was, I'll have to look at my notes now because I don't think I can even remember. Let me just remind myself of when I left Twitter, and I took with me, so I joined Twitter in 2009. So 2024, let's just pop this into the chat so that you can have a look at it if you like, as to my reasons for leaving Twitter and edu-Twitter. And what I use these days tends to be this program here, Blue Sky. But again, it has been fairly recently acquired by venture capital. So, you know, we may have to move again. We become permanent nomads in the ocean, in the open, because we have to find our way through this ever-changing landscape. So up on the Padlet board here, as you can see, someone else was also getting pretty fed up about big tech and how they were manipulating the internet for their own benefit. There's a blog post I've shared with you here by Alistair Creelman. Alistair was one of the early open network learning leaders, and I did my first open network learning session for him back in 2017. He had a really horrible experience. I had a similar thing on Twitter at one point, where his Facebook account was closed by Meta, and without any reason, he lost all his sort of contacts and connections. And as you know, when you share things to Facebook, you may put photos and have all sorts of friends on there that you perhaps only can contact through that network. And despite all his, you know, he couldn't see any reason, he hadn't broken any community guidelines, despite all his best attempts to get their decision reversed, it wasn't reversed. He blogged about that experience and blogged about how the internet that we knew of old was changing and how we had to think more deeply and be more critically aware of the internet and what can possibly happen. And he shared a link to this Norwegian Consumer Council report, which I really recommend. So, you know, do download it and watch the video. I've shared it on here. It's very much a way of, for those of us who were, and you know, see the potential, educational potential of the internet, who want to keep the internet alive, that good internet alive, and don't want it to be turned into a factory for finding and exploiting others. So I really recommend that's something to take a look at and get a really sort of closer idea about. So again, I'm sharing that with you to take a closer look and understand where we are in terms of enshittification and how we can push back. What can we do about it? Especially as the owners now of many of these platforms are not what you would what you would sort of term ordinary people. I mean, these are multi-millionaires who are used to getting their own way. So as I'm sort of nearing my recap, this has been like therapy for me, so thank you very much for allowing me to do this, Jörg. What I've started to do was to sort of think about some tips. I think also I put, just check, some reading material. Here we are. So the book that I was reading to you from just now, and the Adam Becker book, which is heavier reading, I have to say, but it is really interesting because it gives you an insight into the life of the broligarchs, the internet bros that control the many of the large platforms that we're using, and how they're using those platforms very much to amplify their own bias. So if you want to find out more, I really recommend that you dig into those. But let's have a look at some tips from my own journey, which I hope might help you on yours. But I hope as well that through today's session, we can connect and we can use that Padlet to continue the conversation and explore more. And as I say, I've been around in open education for a long time. So if I don't know the answer, which is very possible, I can provide links or networks to help you. So one of the things that's been really, really helpful to me, obviously I taught at Warwick University for 20 years, so I had a Warwick email account. But a lot of the open work I was doing, I was using a personal Gmail account. And it was really, really important that I did that. I didn't really realize until some of the monetization started to happen just how useful that was, because a lot of my materials, once I'd lost my Warwick email address, I wouldn't have been able to access without having that email address that wasn't for my institution, that was personal to me. So I really recommend that. Something that you can take with you. A lot of us throughout our career work for multiple institutions. So a way of making sure that you've got those connections that you can continue and take with you wherever you work. A golden rule, and we've always said this through the Open Ed SIG for years, is whenever you make anything, keep your own copy of your materials, have your own portable hard drive. So I have had to learn that the hard way, because I really wanted to share this critically open presentation for you. I haven't been able to track down my copy. It's on a pen drive somewhere that I took to Louvain-la-Neuve in Belgium in 2019 for a conference. But at the moment, the only copy I've managed to find is up on SlideShare, and they're not getting £11 a month from me in order to get my own material back. So ownership matters. I think it's also really important when you think about your profile online, that you don't get drawn into the trolling and the nastiness that can exist there. So make sure you speak to people kindly and with respect. Be generous, be kind, lead by example, but don't tolerate or get drawn into the nasty spats that there are. You're in the wilds, so don't be afraid to block and report people who react to you in a disrespectful way. Unfortunately, it's particularly a problem for women, and it's particularly a problem for ethnic minorities. So some of the nonsense, you don't get involved. You know, even when you want to scream at them, you're wrong, or this is nonsense, just don't engage. That way your feed will stay with the people who share your values and your ethics. So it's important that you, if you keep your mental health sane as well. However, I would say the huge elephant in the room, you know, I used to worry about people selling my PowerPoints. This is nothing compared to the risks that we face now with AI. And the fact that an awful lot of our content has probably already been scraped to use in large language models. Certainly there are people in my community who have shared that they have discovered AI summaries that contain their published work that has obviously been scraped without their permission. A lot of the platforms that you go to, if you're creating things to share on those platforms, for example, YouTube uses a default license, but if you change that, you will see there is a Creative Commons option. So if you use YouTube to share, make sure you've got the Creative Commons option enabled. I have nagged and nagged for years to say there are 6 Creative Commons licenses. They ought to all be represented on all platforms. So add your voice to that, and let's see if we can't get the internet that we liked back. But digital wisdom, just so important. Take care of yourself and take care of each other online. Make sure that you get good networks behind you like ONL, but there are many networks out there. Think about accessibility. Think about those who perhaps use screen readers. And I've used a Padlet today. If you use a screen reader, I know that Padlet doesn't work terribly well if you're using a screen reader. I'd love to find an alternative, or I'd love them to fix that problem. So again, I raise my voice and use what consumer power I may have in order to do that. Don't pay for things you don't need to pay for. You don't need Twitter's blue ticks. They're nonsense anyway. They're meaningless. So you know, be really careful about what you pay for. If you're paying for a hosting of a blog that you keep and that only you have access to in order to change is really useful. But paying for social storage of things that you've already created, such as my SlideShare example, doesn't make sense. I don't get it. Why would you do it? But as I say, AI, it's just another tech unicorn. So do beware. Keep your creative spirits going and your eyes open. And hopefully those tips will help. And now I'm going to come back and in the last few minutes catch up. Thank you very much, Sarah. Scan back to the chat. I love this.
There's a lot of
the online equivalent of storming out of the room is far less dramatic or noticeable. Yes, Kirsty, this is true. You need a good GIF. Go out with a good GIF. And Pulsar, sorry we've left you, but thank you so much for coming. And hopefully you'll still return to these resources. I know my time is up, but the resources stay there. I will revisit them. I'm still here. I'm retired these days. So if you feel you want more information about any of the things that I've mentioned today, please do get in touch. At Warwick Language is my most visible within LinkedIn and Blue Sky, probably most visible channels. Have used it for a little bit. Haven't had great a great experience of the Mastodon app, unfortunately. So it's just taken a long time to refresh. So I am there. You will find me on Mastodon. But yeah, I haven't really had the best results from it. But what I love about Mastodon is it's federated. And, you know, it means nobody's going to take your stuff and take it away. I think we need as users of the internet, we need to make our voices heard again, and we need to be louder. So the open community is really a great way of funneling that and saying, you know, we should make sure, categories, we should make sure that we support each other and make our voices heard. Yeah, so broligarchs who want to live on Mars, that's all very well, but you know, you're not having my money to send you there.
We hope we can contribute with this course, with your session a little bit. Thank you so much, Teresa. This was wonderful. I
Oh,
loved every
thank
minute
you.
of it, and
Thank
especially
you so
the
much.
way you presented it, and were so welcoming to everyone being around today.
Say hello, Puss. Thank you, and thank you for the therapy.
Yeah, yeah. Hope to see you back in the autumn.
Yes, yes.
We'll be in
Well,
touch for sure.
yes, and if you're interested in extending your virtual networks, look out for Uni Collaboration because I'm still working there, and what we do is connect people online through virtual exchange. I've tried to type that, but I think I've got too many letters going on. Sorry, let me just read that again.
No worries.
You'll find us online. We're a not-for-profit,
Yeah.
and what we do is connect academics around the world and train them in virtual exchange. And we issue open badges. Of course we do, because we
Ah.
recognize open practice.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you everyone for joining, and hope to see you if you would like to know more about Creative Commons licenses and how to find pictures for your reflection spaces, for instance. Come to next week's session. Otherwise, it's plenty out there on the web. And thank you, Teresa, for putting us, showing us the way there for the resources. Yeah, and have fun in your PBL groups. Have a great day, and hope to see you online soon.
Thank you, and thank you all for participating.